Hello and welcome to your local anthropologist. I'm your host, Alina, and this is a bonus episode in my series Utopia of Play, meaning it wasn't really part of the original research that I did to create this series, but since it's happened and it's relevant and in the news, I thought it would be interesting to use a real-life example to explore the idea of collective action, why it's so threatening to power, and why even the most fun and in-demand companies do this to their employees. So without further ado, this is We Got Union Busting Before GTA6, Part 1. A Lens on Collective Action. This post was not originally intended for the Utopia of Play series, but I decided to take the scenic route using a very recent example from the real world. The story of the firings at Rockstar Games is a very insightful one we can use to understand something about power, its contemporary operation in culture, and practically in legislation and action. For those who may not be aware, Rockstar Games created one of the most profitable entertainment franchises in history, Grand Theft Auto. The series is a satirical fever dream of American capitalism, a world where you can rob banks, overthrow corrupt officials, and live out every anti-authoritarian fantasy imaginable. It is sharp, knowing, darkly funny. The game understands that power corrupts, that systems are rigged, that the wealthy prey on everyone else. Perhaps it seemed more absurd before the Trump presidency turned GTA's satire into documentary. Nevertheless, it invites you to burn it all down. It's all fun and games until it's a game of power. You can overthrow corrupt systems, steal from the rich, become the rich, live out a radical world of possibility. This incident isn't just another corporate scandal. It's a perfect, painful allegory for the contradiction at the heart of the entertainment industries and of late capitalism itself. Here is a company that sells fantasies of agency, of rebellion against corrupt systems, of chaotic freedom in sprawling open worlds. Yet, in the real world, it systematically denies its own workers the most basic form of agency, the power to collectively determine their conditions. The very people who polish these worlds of possibility are forbidden from creating a better one for themselves. I've mentioned Adorno before, but with his collaborator Horkheimer, the two identified what they called the culture industry. Put simply, it is the system by which capitalism mass produces art, music, and entertainment, not to enlighten or liberate, but to pacify, turning your deepest desires for freedom and connection into just another commodity to be consumed. In their critique of the culture industry, Adorno and Horkheimer identified the central schism, the yawning chasm between the content of our leisure, the rebellious fantasies, the cooperative triumphs, and the conditions of its production, which are often models of authoritarian control. The culture industry doesn't just sell us entertainment, it sells us a quelling script. It offers the feeling of rebellion without the substance, the simulation of cooperation while enforcing competition and isolation in the real workplace. Your on-screen avatar can lead a revolution, but your real-life attempt to organize your workplace for better conditions is met with the full, unglamorous force of corporate power. But when you look a little closer with an anthropological lens, a successful union reveals something that David Graeber spent most of his career exposing, which is that all economic systems are ultimately built on a substrate of human social agreement. A union demonstrates tangibly that the workers were always capable of saying no. They just needed to say it together. It proves that the boss's power is not a natural law, but a collective fiction, one that can be rewritten. This is why the response is so disproportionately violent. It's not just about preventing a pay rise, it's about preventing a revelation. It is an attempt to snuff out the moment workers realize they are not isolated individuals competing for scraps, but a collective body with the power to dictate terms. David Graeber argued in his analysis of Wall Street that the financial elite understand this power dynamic intimately. They themselves engage in constant, tacit collective action through lobbying, industry groups, and political donations to socialize risks and privatize gains, all while fiercely opposing the same right to collective bargaining for their workers. They know that the real threat isn't a demand for higher wages, it's the emergence of a counterpower that challenges the very legitimacy of their rule. When union busting shows up in a workplace, one can recognize in it the defensive ritual of a system in crisis. It is the culture industry's immune system kicking in, attacking the very idea that the freedom it sells could ever be made real. But as we will see, this act of suppression only illuminates the path to liberation even more clearly. The heist to reclaim your time, creativity, and lives from the extractive machine is perhaps the most important game you'll ever play. The Emperor's Clothes. Why would a company worth billions be so terrified of a union? On the surface, it's about profit margins and control. The official line will always be something technical, a policy violation, gross misconduct, anything but the real reason. I will dive a little deeper into this in part 2. For now, looking a little closer with an anthropological lens, a successful union reveals something that David Graeber spent a lot of his career exposing, that all economic systems are ultimately built on a substrate of human social agreement. A union demonstrates tangibly that the workers were always capable of saying no. They just needed to say it together. It proves that the boss's power is not a natural law but a collective fiction, one that can be rewritten. This is why the response is so disproportionately violent. It's not just about preventing a pay rise, it's about preventing a revelation, an awakening that their power is null, the emperor has no clothes. It is an attempt to snuff out the moment workers realize they are not isolated individuals competing for scraps, but a collective body with the power to dictate terms. As Graeber argued in his analysis of Wall Street, the financial elite understand this power dynamic intimately. They themselves engage in constant tacit collective action through lobbying, industry groups, and political donations to socialize risks and privatize gains, all while fiercely opposing the same right to collective bargaining for their workers. They know that the real threat isn't a demand for higher wages, it's the emergence of a counter-power that challenges the very legitimacy of their rule. When union busting shows up in a workplace, one can recognize in it the defensive ritual of a system in crisis. It is the culture industry's immune system kicking in, attacking the very idea that the freedom it sells could ever be made real. But as we will see, this act of suppression only illuminates the path to liberation more clearly. The heist to reclaim our time, our creativity, and our lives from the extractive machine is the most important game we will ever play. The double game, how the culture industry manufactures consent. Before we can really look at what freedom from these games might look like, we need to understand the system we're up against. Adorno and Horkheimer's culture industry is not a mere observation of hypocrisy. It is an analysis of a sophisticated control system. The creations produced under this system actively cultivate the human desire for freedom, cooperation, and meaning-making, only to channel them into pre-approved, commodified outlets that ultimately reinforce the status quo. It doesn't say no to your need for rebellion. It says yes, but only here, in this way, and for a price. This system operates on a simple, brutal logic. It sells you the feeling of a successful heist in a game, whilst ensuring the actual conditions of the game's production make collective action feel like a fantasy. You spend your evening in a digital world where collaboration with a crew, voice chat, a whole team is essential to the mission, only to clock into a workplace where the architecture is designed for atomization, where teamwork is a mandated performance, not genuine solidarity. The exhaustion built into this system means you spend your evening performing digital solidarity, and by the time you clock in, you're too drained to build the real thing. The culture industry doesn't just offer a substitute for collective action, it actively depletes the cognitive and emotional resources required for it. This is extraction masquerading as entertainment. The same management that will crush a union drive in the name of direct relationships and individual merit will simultaneously mandate return to office policies justified entirely by appeals to collaboration, team culture, and spontaneous innovation. Teamwork, it turns out, is sacred, but only when it serves the surveillance and control apparatus of the office. Workers coming together to demand better conditions, that's divisive. workers being forced back to open plan offices to perform collaboration theater under managerial oversight. That's fostering our culture. The message is clear. Collective action is only legitimate when it is choreographed from above, when it reinforces rather than challenges the existing hierarchy. Your leisure becomes a pressure valve, a carefully managed simulation that provides just enough catharsis to make the real-world effort of building power seem unnecessary, or worse, naive. In the Utopia of Rules, Graeber identified this as the weaponization of our longing for transparent, fair systems. We are drawn to games precisely because they offer a utopia of rules, clear goals, legible feedback, a world where effort maps to outcome. The culture industry expertly replicates this aesthetic of fairness and agency in its products, yet the corporations that create these virtual utopias of rules are themselves bureaucratic black boxes where the real rules of advancement are opaque, shifting, and rooted in social hierarchy, not competence. It actually reminds me of like the whole Marvel universe and the above the line, below the line payment problem that happens in Hollywood, where like everyone who works on the animations and special effects and CGI in Hollywood are like paid absolute shit. And then you have all the above the line workers who are just like, you know, celebrities and all the famous faces that you recognize. But it is the same system and still part of the culture industry. This was an aside and is not in the article. But anyway, I'll continue. This hypocrisy reaches its peak in the corporate response to collective action. Unions are, in theory, a legally protected right in the UK, a clear rule in the game of labour relations. Yet, as labour scholar Kate Andreas meticulously documents, employers have at their disposal a vast toolkit of legal coercion to subvert this right. They are able to weaponize the very bureaucracy meant to ensure fairness. Endless hearings over unit composition, challenges to voter eligibility, strategic delays that drain organizers' energy and resources. These are not violations of the rules, but tactical uses of them. The law provides a framework for unionization, but it is a framework so laden with procedural tripwires and technicalities that it becomes a labyrinth designed to get workers lost. This is Graeber's bureaucratic violence in practice. A system that maintains an appearance of neutrality and legality while its complex arcane procedures serve to protect power. The promise of a fair process, a utopia of rules, is held out like a carrot while the entire machinery is calibrated to ensure the outcome remains the same. They sell you a world of agential clarity in their games while trapping you in a reality of bureaucratic violence where the rules are not just invisible, but designed to be weaponized against you the moment you try to use them for your own liberation. The culture industry is not omnipotent. It must keep selling us these fantasies because the desires themselves are real and persistent. You genuinely crave cooperation. You ache for agency. You need to feel that your actions matter. The system can't eliminate these fundamental human drives, hardwired into us by millennia of social evolution. It can only attempt to redirect them into consumption. This redirection, however, is a constant, unstable process. It's like trying to dam a river. The water continues to press against the barriers, seeking its natural course. The fantasies of solidarity and rebellion sold by the culture industry are potent because they tap into a deep, authentic well of human sociality. And sometimes that pressure becomes too great. The dam cracks. The desire for real cooperation, no longer satisfied by the simulation, breaks containment and seeks expression in the one place the system cannot allow, the point of production itself. The attempt to unionize is precisely such a crack. It is the moment the simulated cooperation of the game is rejected in favor of the real, dangerous, and powerful cooperation of the workplace. It is the ultimate failure of the culture industry's redirection mechanism, and it reveals that the greatest threat to power is not our anger, but our capacity to remember what we truly want, and to want it together. The boss fight as political theater. Let's think about one of the most fundamental mechanics of a video game, the boss fight. The entire narrative and ludic architecture of most games is built around this premise. You, the player, are meant to identify a locus of oppressive power, gather your strength and resources, learn its patterns, and ultimately overthrow it. This is the heroic arc, the cathartic release the entire experience is designed to deliver. From Bowser to the Elder Gods, the message is consistent. Concentrated, unaccountable power is a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be demolished. This mechanic is political theater of the highest order. It trains us in a specific satisfying form of resistance. The rules are clear, the boss is the enemy. Victory is possible. Your allies, if you have them, are trustworthy. The system itself is designed for you to succeed. It is a perfect self-contained ritual of rebellion. Now step back into the real world of the culture industry. The same company that spent millions designing this cathartic fantasy of toppling a tyrant will, without a hint of irony, deploy the full force of its legal and HR department to crush any real-world attempt by its workers to challenge its authority. The boss you are meant to defeat in the game is a metaphor. The boss who defeats your union in real life is your employer. This is the culture industry's double game in its purest form. It provides a simulated outlet for our deep-seated desire to confront power, ensuring that desire is spent on digital phantoms rather than real-world hierarchies. The thrill of the boss fight becomes a substitute for the more difficult, less clearly defined work of challenging power in our own lives. We become experts at virtual insurrection and amateurs at actual workplace organizing. What works so effectively and is so profound in its cynicism of this system is that it recognizes and commodifies our innate understanding that power should be held to account. It sells us this feeling of justice while ensuring the structures of injustice remain untouched. The game's code is built on the premise that the boss is the problem. The corporation's bottom line depends on you never applying that logic to the person who signs your paycheck. Closing thoughts. That's exactly what happened at Rockstar. Workers took the core lesson of the boss fight, that concentrated power should be held to account, and applied it where it actually mattered. They broke the script. They exposed the central lie of the culture industry, that rebellion is a product to be consumed, not a power to be built. So what did the culture industry do? Exactly what it always does when the simulation fails to contain the real thing. It deployed the full force of its legal and HR apparatus. It reminded everyone who the real boss is. But some things can't be undone. The workers have already seen behind the curtain. We've all seen the script now. Fight the digital boss, leave the actual one untouched. Play at revolution in your leisure time and accept subjugation in working hours. Next week, I'll look at what happens when workers remember what we're actually capable of, when the dam finally cracks. Because for all the culture industry's sophistication, for all its careful management of our desires, it has a weakness. It is built on a lie, and that lie, that extraction is natural, that hierarchy is inevitable, that we are at our core competitors rather than cooperators. That lie, it deserves to be unpicked. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Utopia of Play. I'm your host, Alina, and this is your local anthropologist. Next time, I will be looking at part 2 in We Got Union Busting Before GTA 6. I hope I'll see you there.